a racer, Carroll Shelby wanted to win the World Manufacturers' Championship with the Cobra, and in 1963, cars were constructed to FIA specifications and were entered at Sebring, Daytona, and Le Mans. No wins for the Cobra team, but one of the cars finished 7th behind 6 Ferraris at the French Classic. Number CSX-2010 has been restored to competition specifications, similar to the car Dan Gurney drove to victory in an international event in September of 1963. The Cobra's aerodynamics were not ideal, so Ford fabricated special lightweight aluminum tops for its 1963 Le Mans effort. Competition Cobras were constructed in 5 configurations to compete in 5 different racing classes: FIA Roadsters, FIA Daytona Coupes, the USRRC Roadsters, the Le Mans Roadsters, and the Le Mans Replicas. This example, originally powered by a 260 cubic inch engine, now sports a 289 fitted with late Gurney Westlake heads and 4 2-barrel Weber carburetors. An impressive number of options were available from Shelby American, so a racer could compete successfully in all types of racing competition. Everything from FIA endurance events to local and national drag meets. The orange stripe on number 97 duplicates the color scheme of the FIA Roadsters, each of which bore a different colored identification stripe. Considerable modifications were made for racing effort, including the wide flaring of fenders. This example sports wheels found on the 427 competition Cobras. Normally, the pin-drive Halabrand magnesium center lock wheels were used on the 289 FIA and USRRC Roadsters. Quick jack mounts and a competition fuel filler marked some of the other racing tricks utilized by Shelby. The fine detail of this restoration can be appreciated in this series of intimate close-ups. Engine options ranged from 271 horsepower to a whopping 380 horsepower in the drag racing version. Base price of the car in street trim was $59.95 and up as eager racers added performance goodies of their choice. Let's experience this sassy racer as it should be experienced, on the racetrack. The versatility of Shelby American showed in the various versions of competition Cobras offered. A lightweight slalom version was highly competitive, as was the Dragon Snake, set up for drag racing. The Cobra transmission was the standard Borg-Warner T10, enclosed in an aluminum casing. The later 427 version used a Ford-based transmission. Transmissions were available with several final drive ratios, with top speeds varying from 110 to 180 miles per hour. Now that the Cobra has been warmed up, it is joined by a few fast friends. 1963, 1964, and 1965, 27 FIA races saw Cobras on the starting grid. Cobras enjoyed either the fastest qualifying lap or the fastest GT race lap in 26 of those 27 outings. All 427 competition Cobras constructed boasted whitened and flared fenders, cutouts for side exhaust pipes, and even larger brake calipers than those used on the standard 427. A quick-release fuel filler cap was fitted on the right rear fender, and quick jack pads were attached fore and aft. Of the 50-plus competition Cobras, about 40 427s were developed as the 427 SC, or semi-competition version. The SC seen here in recent action utilized a front-mounted oil cooler, which was one of the visible trademarks of the 427 SC. Note the whitened and flared fenders. "7.5-inch Hallobrand wheels were mounted in the front. 9.5-inch versions were mounted at the rear. This particular car has seen considerable vintage racing action and has been maintained in a high-quality state. The SCs used the 427 medium riser with single or dual carburetor options. This example uses a single Holley 850 CFM carburetor with center squirter. This engine generates approximately 520 horsepower in its present state of tune. Air for the center squirter is drawn through the hood. SCs used a 42-gallon fuel tank, and an auxiliary electric fuel pump moved gasoline to the carburetor more effectively. SCs weighed some 400 pounds less than the street version of the 427. Options for the SC included many gear ratios, a dry sump oiling system, a chronometric tachometer, quick change brake pads, and shoulder harnesses. The dash was slightly altered. Removed were the glove compartment, ashtray, and cigarette lighter. The 427 Cobra was the most awesome street car ever produced for the American road. In December 1966, the last 427 Cobra left the AC factory. The Ford Motor Company was winding down its total performance program, and Shelby's Cobras were to suffer as a result. So the Shelby dream came and went. With assistance, friendship, and perseverance from such racing notables as Pete Brock, Ken Miles, Dave McDonald, Phil Remington, Al Dowd, and Dan Gurney. The Cobra name has survived, however, having been used on many succeeding Ford models through the years. The GT350R. Yes, R for race. Its development took place right along with the standard GT350 street cars, and it was produced in a limited number of 37 automobiles during 1965. This front apron was unique to the R. The fiberglass piece sported air intake ducts for the brakes. This particular car was built very late in the series and has the unique vertical intake ducts for the brakes versus the round ones on earlier models. It also sports the 1966 style grille and side stripes, but it's still registered as a 1965 automobile. The R was specifically prepared to do battle in the SCCA B production class, and there it dominated. The R looked like a race car. Its 7-inch wide racing mags along with racing tires filled the inner wheel wells, all of which were slightly altered to allow proper clearance. The side vents were deleted in favor of solid aluminum panels. The rear window consisted of plexiglass with a 2-inch curvature at the top to allow for proper venting of the interior of the car. This is unique to the R. Unique also to the R was the deletion of the rear bumper and a cover over the normal filler spout. Fastened within the rear compartment was a 34-gallon fuel tank with a quick fill assembly. To properly deliver the fuel up front, an auxiliary electric pump was placed in the left corner of the rear compartment. Thin aluminum panels covered the inner doors, and simple pull straps raised and lowered the plexiglass window within the aluminum framing structure. The interior was stark, with semi-gloss paint covering most of the inner structure. Fiberglass racing buckets supported the driver very well. A substantial roll bar assembly was included. The dash was completely reworked to include a full set of competition gauges. This particular car, serial number 5R528, shows just over 2,000 original miles. The R's engine compartment got very special treatment. The top side of the engine was completely reworked. A special camshaft was unique to the R. The air intake plenum on the Holley 715 CFM carburetor was very special as well. The oil system received special treatment with a high-volume pump, a baffled oil pan, and a remote oil filter and oil cooler, along with an increased capacity radiator. The high-rise intake manifold was also unique to the R. Although this R is licensed for the street in California, it's by no means a comfortable street car. There's little protection afforded against noise and heat from the engine. The window assemblies rattle incessantly, and the tires move very little within the wheel well. The exhaust exits basically unhindered from the headers, which means there is little opportunity for normal conversation. But, after all, this was not what the R was made for. The R was made for the racetrack, and there it's shown. During the 1965, 66, and 67 seasons, it won the National B Production SCCA titles handily. Its heritage is traced back to Willow Springs Raceway in the high desert northeast of Los Angeles. Here, all R models received their development, right alongside the awesome GT40. Each one of the 37 Rs that were built by Shelby were brought to Willow Springs and track tested to make certain they were set up properly and performed as expected. At the same time the Shelby program was going on, of course, the GT40 Mark IIs were in development for Ford's assault on Le Mans. And the Cobra 427 program was going full tilt. So in the mid-60s, Willow Springs got a real workout from the Shelby crew. For 1968, events were to change drastically. Ford decided to withdraw from racing, and international rules called for a 5-liter limit on engine displacement. This marked the active appearance of John Wyer's JW Engineering. They had raced Mirages, modified GT40s, during the 1967 season. For 1968, Wyer decided the Ford Mark I had good potential for 5-liter racing. So the Mark I was redeveloped and refined into the Mark I-B. The brakes were updated and the engine was improved, running now at 4.9 liters, just under the limit, and was capable of producing 400 horsepower. The rear fenders were widened to accommodate the fatter racing tires of the day. The Mark I-B showed a much narrower roofline than the Mark I. Improved ventilation and ducting in the car also helped reduce drag. Working on a very limited budget, the Wyer team set the cars up for the Daytona 24 Hours in 1968. Jackie Eakes qualified his car faster than the record times turned in by the previous year's Mark IV. This, of course, questions all the expense and effort expended in the design of the Mark IV, which may not have been necessary. Porsche 907s were to dominate the Daytona event, finishing 1, 2, 3. At Sebring, a 907 sweep also took place. Eakes and Redmond, along with Hawkins and Hobbs, retired their Wyer Mark I-Bs. The group's racing luck improved at the VOAC 500, with Eakes Redmond finishing first and Hawkins Hobbs fourth. The team was again victorious at Monza, with Hawkins Hobbs taking a clear victory. 4.9-liter Ford V8 marked the appearance of the Gurney Westlake heads. A new design innovation which helped boost the horsepower to 400 plus. More power, along with new improved body lines, made the Mark 1B more than competitive with its predecessors. This engine was to prove extremely reliable and allowed the Ford cars to continue their Le Mans domination in both 1968 and 1969. This example, number 1076, is a sister to the 1075 car with which Ickx won Le Mans in 1968 and 1969. This car maintains its originality with majesty, having finished third in the 1969 Le Mans competition with Hobbs and Halewood aboard. A good view of the quick-change brake disc, and the tried-and-true GT40 suspension system. Let's take number 1076 back where she's shown. Le Mans, the year 1968. The JW Automotive Mark 1Bs were at the Sarth circuit without Ford support, but were under the very able command of John Wyer, who had considerable experience in the GT40 program, having built all of the cars at the fabrication facility in England. The main competition for the three Fords came from Porsche, as Ferrari was not officially entered as a works team. Although the three Gulf cars were very well prepared, the long-tail 908 Porsches held the fastest practice laps and could even pass the Fords on the long 3-mile Mulsanne straight. As the race began, Rolf Stommelin's Porsche jumps into the lead, along with three other Porsches. The soonest Ford got away was in sixth position, the Brian Muir-driven car. The race started cleanly, and by the end of lap number 1, Porsches held the first 4 positions. As the race progressed, the Porsches began to suffer from electrical problems, and the Fords began to close the gap. 8 hours into the race, Rodriguez and Bianchi were leading in the Mark 1B with a Matra V12 very close behind. Brian Muir's Mark 1B found its way into a sand barrier, and he lost much valuable time digging out. After all this hard work, the car was later retired with clutch problems. The Mulsaw Corner was a famous sand trap. As Porsche's problems continued throughout the night, the JW Automotive Ford of Rodriguez and Bianchi was 6 laps ahead as dawn approached. The weather was not good during the night, and many cars were left by the wayside during the hours of darkness. With only 2 Porsches left by noon, one 908 and one 907, the German cars picked up the pace. The second-place Alfa had dropped out, as had the third-place Matra. Rodriguez-Bianchi car ran flawlessly and took the checkered flag. Ford first, Porsche second and third, Alfa T33s fourth, fifth, and sixth. These modified GT40s were to continue their winning ways in 1969 at Le Mans, with Jackie Eakes taking an exciting win away from Hans Hermann in a Porsche 917.